I'm Ross, a curious parent.
And I'm John, an education expert.
This is From the Sidelines.
Bite-sized study tips to help you help them through.
John, I'm ready and fired for another absolute nugget from yourself.
I'm hoping so. You put a bit of pressure on me again to deliver some golden nuggets.
You always deliver, John. You've always delivered. Up to this point, you've definitely delivered. So we've seen it from people sharing with us through social channels that they have been putting this into practice, which is really important, isn't it, for us to?
It is. It's great to see that the impact of our work and how it's making a difference to families, all over the place. The people have been reaching out, saying how it's been useful. Some of them have been sharing pictures of how they've done it, and we know that other people have taken inspiration from that. That actually everyone can do it, and it's nice seeing how other people are implementing that from a parent-to-parent point of view, not just ourselves seeing it, but other people as well.
And one of the things I'm really enjoying about this kind of section of topics, if you like, is that it isn't necessarily about the exam. It isn't necessarily about 6-12 months before it, although that obviously plays a massive part. But what we're covering at the moment is that kind of preparation really close to exam time and the difference that it makes the night before, etc., to performance within that environment.
That's right, and this is where parents can play a really big part. As we've always said, that you don't need to know the content, you don't need to be an expert in Shakespeare or mathematics or the science topics, anything like that. It's about the conditions that your child is, I suppose, studying and living in, at home, and that goes into routines, whether it's nutrition, whether it's food, and whether it's some of the topics we're going to be talking about today.
So what is today's topic, John? Just fire away with it.
Okay, the title is You Can't Fool Your Body the Night Before an Exam.
Okay, interesting. And again, one that I've looked at and thought about what does that mean with regards to that kind of period, that preparation beforehand. We mentioned in a previous episode where we were talking about kind of cramming, staying up late, and now I'm guessing that we kind of almost contradicting that in some way, or how does that fit in relation to that particular topic that we covered earlier?
Well, in a very short and basic terms, if you start to make significant changes to your body clock or to your routines the night before an exam, then it's not good.
Okay.
Because your body's not going to be in a routine, your body's going to be out of sync, and it's going to feel a very strange situation for your body because it's very different to what it's been used to.
So it's almost a disclaimer that we're putting in place here, isn't it? And probably one that kind of follows on beautifully from the previous podcast episode, in that if you have always stayed up late, then you should not look to change that right before the exam time. Is that correct?
It is correct, I suppose, to a certain degree, yes. Because what we're saying here is if your child, and let's imagine you're listening to this now and there's an exam tomorrow, let's frame it in that kind of context. If your child has always been staying up and has a regular sleep pattern that they do not go to sleep until midnight, 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, if you try and change that today for their exam tomorrow, it's not going to work. And it's almost going to be counterproductive. So my advice would be if, and this is a big if they are in those habits, those kind of, not very good habits, that they are staying up late, et cetera, it's probably worth actually leaving them and leave them in that habit if the exam is tomorrow. Now, hopefully, people might be listening to this and they might be thinking, well, the exam's in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks' time, et cetera, et cetera. Right, well, you need to be starting to change that habit now so that they get used to it. But yes, you're right. If it's the night before, you're probably better off staying with your habit so your body is used to the condition that it's in and used to those kind of sleep patterns, rather than suddenly trying to change something at the last minute, which we know is not going to work. And if I give you an example of that, think about it when you've been on like a long haul flight and your body is like out of sync because your body clock is all over the place, you're in a different time zone. That first 24 to 48 hours, you feel just strange. It's different. That's not what you want on the day of a big exam, okay? So at that point, it's probably better off staying with this. However, another disclaimer, that's not an excuse to just say, oh, okay, then that's fine. I won't change my body clock at all. We need to be changing it a few weeks out.
Yeah, so touching on that a little bit further, you're mentioning there that not doing it the night before, doing it far more in advance is something that we should actively try to encourage our children to do.
Correct. And it might be that you start to use that in conjunction with a study planner.
Yeah.
So you then start to actually put on the times of sleep and changing that.
Okay.
And again, we've talked before about thinking about your child's body like an athlete would. So thinking about when the exam is, or when the first exam is, almost like an athlete would look at when the event is and planning backwards from there. Right, we need to start adjusting this, sleep clock. Now, a really good tip for parents is that you don't have to adjust the body clock all in one go. So if the exam is in 3 weeks' time, you might want to adjust it, by 20 minutes at a time over 2 or 3 days. Adjust it by 20 minutes or half an hour, and then another half an hour after that. So we're not suddenly trying to adjust it from 1 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock in the evening all in one go, but we're just gradually 20 minutes or half an hour at a time, nudging it forward or backwards, whichever you want to look at it, to get into the right time. So that might be a really good way of doing it.
Yeah, more of a sort of staggered approach.
Gradual approach,
and it fits in with a lot of the things that we've mentioned in other topics as well, where we spoke about, motivation and rewards. Sometimes it's starting that off a little bit that is the most difficult piece, and then actually gradually over time it kind of becomes, again, that habit, that approach that hopefully is something that kind of the child will get to grips with and will do it almost on their own.
Absolutely. You want this to be something that can be maintained, and that they as well feel the benefit for. So they feel fresher in the morning, they feel more energized, they feel like they're not, and they feel ready to go at 9 o'clock. Because actually that's probably when an exam's going to start or a lesson's going to start. So it's really important to make sure that they're ready to go. And they need to be fully fueled and ready to go at 9, not, I generally start to kind of come round a bit by 10, 11. Well, that's halfway through an exam potentially.
Yeah.
We need to be at peak performance ready at that time. So definitely working back from that. And also thinking, well, if you're thinking about sleep time, going to sleep time, you also need to think about awake time. Now, if your exam is 9 o'clock or school starts at 8:30, whatever it is, your wake time can't be just half an hour in front of that. Like kind of before that 8 o'clock. We need to be thinking about, well, how do we have enough time for breakfast? We talked about it in one of the last episodes. Do we have enough time to make sure we're ready, we're fed, we're watered, we can get to school, exam, however it is, in the right time, so we're not rushing and then saying, I've got no time for breakfast, I'm in a rush. All of these things need to be planned. So thinking about sleep times and wake times is really important.
There's a lot out there, isn't there, with how much sleep an adult should get. There's, kind of in terms of hours to create optimal performance. What about from a young person, a child's perspective? What does that amount of sleep look like? Okay,
so you're right in saying that generally we always hear about, the term that's banded around is about 8 hours sleep, isn't it? 7 to 8 hours sleep is what as adults we require in order to replenish our energy levels, to have our repair and growth, and also for our brain to process all the information that we've been learning and actually join the dots up, and fit the jigsaw pieces together while we're asleep. Our brains do some amazing work while we're asleep, and that is part of the learning process. With children, it's slightly different, and they need a little bit longer. So then we would normally say 8 to 10 hours. Okay, so a little bit longer than an adult. So again, if you think about wake times and school time or exam time, let's imagine that if I give a rough estimate that your child needs to be up at 7 o'clock in the morning so that they're ready out the door for the school bus or walking to school or cycling or you take them to school, then if you work back from there, depending on how old your child is, between that 8 and 10 hours, that means they're probably going to need to go to sleep between 9 and 11, and probably realistically 9, 9:30, 10, not at the top end of that in terms of 11 and starting to stretch it into 11, half 11, 12, etc. Because if they need to be up at 7 o'clock, they're not getting that 8 to 10 hours sleep. So thinking about that, and again, working back from that, and as I said a minute ago, using a sleep time and a wake time and an event time to then actually, work that out and go, right, and I do that. In terms of if I'm going to, traveling to a new school or traveling to a conference, or I'm thinking, right, what time does it start? How long's the journey? Therefore, what time do I need to be up to make sure I've got enough time before I leave the house? I reckon I normally need between 45 minutes and an hour after I wake up before I can leave the house in order to be fully ready, washed, clothed, fed, have everything in my hand and get into the car. So I work that back and then go, right, so that means I need to be going to bed at a so-and-so time. It just, you just work it out. It's pretty simple.
It's one of the weirdest things I think in life as well is, as an adult, I love sleep. I think people love sleep as adults. It's a very nice time of the day, sleeping. And yet for children, it still seems to be something that, they quite often can Kick up against can almost create issues around that, which we probably can't get right in our heads because, again, we enjoy it so much. So being realistic, if there's parents and carers out there where their child is struggling to engage with the idea of going to sleep at between 9 and half 10 or whatever that may be, do we have any tips, any advice to give them to really help them with that?
Yeah, if I break that down into two sections, the first would be how you educate them and sell the idea that sleep's important. That's really important, because if they don't know that and they just see it as boring, as you kind of referred to, or kind of nothing happens and it's then they're not going to want to go to sleep. So the first part is educating them why. Doesn't need to be a big lecture, but just talking to them about growth and repair and how your brain works. And you can find out there's lots and lots of studies on that, of how it's so important and it has so many health benefits. So the first part is explaining why it's important. Once you've done that, then the second part of this is where I'll give some practical strategies. So once you've done the first part, the second part is, simple things that we might not, and again, this isn't just for kids, this is for us as well, as adults. Limiting caffeine intake an hour or so before bed. We know that caffeine's a stimulant, and actually it's going to keep you almost wired. The last thing is, having a cup of coffee, half an hour, 20 minutes, before they go to bed, or drinking, a kind of Pepsi, kind of Coke, that's not going to help. Okay, so limiting that and stopping the kind of intake of that. The other thing to limit, which you will, as a parent of two younger children, you'll find this out at some point. I'm certainly finding out now, of parent of two teenagers, is trying, and I say trying because it's very difficult, trying to limit screen time on mobile devices or any digital devices. Again, potentially an hour or so before bed, because the light that those devices kind of emit, it fools our body into thinking that it's daytime, right? So it could be 9, 10 o'clock at night. It could be dark outside. It could be the winter. But suddenly your child's eyes are seeing this light and it's telling their brain it's daytime. It's daytime. We need to be up. We need to be awake. And it starts to then, awaken them again. So limiting screen time is really important. And then other little things, such as making sure the room is dark, because thinking about it from an evolutionary point of view, our bodies tend to want to sleep when it's dark. All right, so we know this from thousands of years. Let's make sure we have. So that's why people have blackout blinds. Again, shutting doors, turning off lights on landings, that kind of stuff. Making sure that it's as dark as possible so that we can get to sleep. Little things like potentially turning the lights down as well in the house an hour or so before bedtime. So we're creating that illusion, I suppose, that it is time to go to bed. It's getting darker. And you will start to find that your body will naturally fall into feeling more tired and relaxed because the environment is becoming darker. Now, I say turn down the lights. That might be with something like a dimmer switch if you can actually turn them down, or maybe even just starting to turn some of them off and not have the big kind of ceiling lights on, the bright lights, but only having side lamps or that type of. So again, it brings it down and we're starting to feel like it's getting darker. And again, if I give you a real practical example, think about when you are lying in, let's say, a dark room or a bedroom, and you're just lying there, whether it's watching something on telly or that kind of, you generally start to feel tired because it's really dark if you've got all those lights out. It makes you feel a bit sleepy. So use those things to your advantage. And also, if you are the adult and you're downstairs, turn the volume down. Start to have those things where you're respectful of their sleep upstairs. And yeah, the more you can do of that, again, in your own life, if you're struggling to sleep, because we all know that the worst thing in the world is knowing you have to be asleep and trying to get to sleep and not being able to get to sleep because you've tried to fool your body into thinking, I've got a big event tomorrow, I need to be asleep 2 hours early. Well, if your body's not ready to be asleep, it doesn't matter what you try, doesn't matter whether you turn the lights down, you ain't going to sleep. And the more you stress about it, the more you can't get to sleep, the more you're thinking about it, the more it increases your stress. And that's why I said right at the top of the episode, at this point, it's probably better off keeping your routine if you're trying to do it the night before, because all you're doing is inducing more stress on your body, which just isn't good. So really, plan it early, use those practical tips, and maybe change it gradually over the period of time. They would be my kind of top 3 takeaways, really, I suppose, from this.
And a lot of those things that you've mentioned, Dane, I think about in terms of the journey, parenting, that's the early days stuff, isn't it? With the newborn, the 6-month-old, kind of creating that illusion of evening, of night time, so that they differentiate between day and night. So we're always coming back round in a bit of a circle, aren't we? As kind of parenting, where we again at a crucial stage in a child's life, creating that element of day and night.
100%. And as you were saying that, I was nodding along, like, we know this.
Yeah, we've done it.
Like, we know this and we've done this.
Yeah.
Why should it be any different? And I think sometimes we feel that, we don't need to do it now because they're 15, they're 16, they're 7. We're still humans and our body still operates in a very, very similar way. That when we see light, we feel like we're awake. When we feel dark, and when we see dark, we feel like we're more sleepy. The same happens. So use what we already know and just bring that back to the forefront of our mind and implement those strategies at the most crucial time in our young people's lives.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. Absolutely. Again, simple, but really, really effective and really, really important, isn't it, for creating that whole element of being able to succeed.
Absolutely. And as you said right at the start, it's a lot of these tips now are about the conditions that our children live in, rather than the content. And as parents, we can play a really big part in that, and really feel like we're also being supportive as well by helping with all these things. And again, educating and telling the students why, telling the children why, rather than just suddenly, you now need to go to bed 2 hours earlier. Because I'm telling you now, that's not going to work, Ross. Don't try that one. Educate gradually, talk them through it, and be part of it with them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's only one thing less to go now. Let's go have a sleep.
Sounds good to me.
Let's go have a nap.
Sounds good.
No, thanks, John. That's hopefully practical advice as well, which we're really conscious about, that will help when we're building up to that exam time and that real critical time in a young person's life. So thanks very much again. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be back again soon with lots more tips and tricks to help them through.